This has been, for me, a really interesting conversation. I'm glad we're having it. Although I need to say to the two of you, I'm disappointed that neither one of you suggested, given the timing of the year, that we should have been doing this with eggnog. So.
Well, don't we have one more before Christmas we have scheduled to record? We can all come with our beverage of choice at that point. So.
And your sweaters are way too tasteful for this time of year, guys.
Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, marriage and family therapist Pete Russos, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 60 years of divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting. So here we are, winding down another year. I can't believe it's December already. It seems that we just did this.
So let me ask you guys: is there something special about the end of the year as it relates to, in your mind, the processes of divorce? Like, what comes up for you guys when you think about end of year? Or I guess another way of thinking about it is not just end of year, but start of new year.
Well, the first thing that happens to me is I got the people that are trying to finish their case and they want to be divorced by the end of the year. And the only reason that somebody really needs to be concerned about divorcing by the end of the year is if they... if there's a tax reason for it. So if they want to file separately without taking the hit and having to file married filing separately, it's best if they can be divorced before the end of the year. Although honestly, Mark, you and I have experienced that most people do better just waiting until January to call themselves divorced and then filing jointly for the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the best outcome, saves the couple both money. They have to talk to their accountant to make sure obligations are split appropriately, and there may be another small bill from the accountant to do that work, but they're better off just about in every single case to file jointly, marriage filing jointly. And even when we've got the case resolved months ahead of the end of the year, where the judgment is signed, it's actually sitting on the judge's desk, and the judge will sign it early in January, and they'll be final then, but they can literally then file the joint return for this current tax year.
I had a case where it was like a week before the end of the year, and I submitted a judgment, and I told the people, don't worry, they won't be able to file this until the end of the, it won't be final until January. And lo and behold, if the court didn't go ahead and terminate their marital status on December 30th, they actually processed the judgment in January, but they thought they were doing them a favor by processing on December 30th, and it just screwed everything up for their taxes.
Oh boy, yeah.
So now I've gotten in a habit, if they really want to make sure they're divorcing in the new year, to go ahead and let the court know when I send it. Yeah. But the courts here in San Diego do a special walkthrough date, but you have to turn all the papers in 15 days before the walkthrough date. And they usually set the walkthrough date like around the 18th of December, depending on the courtroom. And you think 15 court days, so you have to remove holidays and weekends. That gets you back pretty far, like towards the beginning of December, end of November. And so most people have missed the opportunity to get the guaranteed walkthrough date. But the judges are saying that if you turn it in now, they'll process it by the end of the year. I'll see if that's really true. So, I mean, there's that. The other reason that sometimes people want to have it done by the end of the year is just a psychological reason. Mm-hmm. I need to be divorced. I've had people say that to me, and it doesn't matter to them as much financially and legally. What really matters to them is just, I need my marital status terminated this year. I can't go into a new year being married to this person.
Yeah.
And I get that. I would probably suggest to folks that you cut yourself some slack on that and just remember it's just a date. But
unless there's a desire to remarry in January.
Well, there's that.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many cases I've had where somebody's got wedding invitations printed already, and
Yes.
like, you're not going to be divorced by that date. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or I guess, and then, as we're talking about it, thinking about those cases of people who are contemplating divorce, and how many times I've heard over the course of my career where couples talk about, let's wait and not make the decision, or individuals, let's not make the decision until the new year. Get through the holidays, make it easier, perhaps on the children, and I understand that, but at the same time, there is no best time, I think, to announce the decision to divorce. I mean, I've
Right.
seen families where kids appreciated the fact that they didn't know what was going on until after the holidays, and seen situations in families where the withholding of that information was actually something that the kids experienced is making it more difficult and more challenging. We
talked about that on our last podcast.
Yeah.
That sometimes the kids feel like they've been duped.
Absolutely.
So, it just kind of recap what we talked about last time. It's very important when you think about the decision to talk to family about the divorce that you just do it in a unified way, in a way that's not too cute. I think some people try to make it, well, we're going to get through Christmas because it'll be nice and we'll open presents together. Well, your kids aren't stupid.
Right.
Even the small kids can tell when there's negativity going on and when things are awful. I mean, how many cases have you had, Pete, where somebody says to you, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they're finally getting divorced?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think a lot of times what happens, not to recap too much of what we did last time, but I think a lot of times what happens is the kids do much better than the parents do. And the parents are kind of worried about their own emotions, but they're putting it on their kids. Don't you think that happens?
Yeah.
It's like the house conversation. I can live in under an underpass, but I must have the mansion for the children, Yeah.
And you find out that the kids are going to be fine. Kids are far more adaptable than the parents are.
Yeah.
Not that you shouldn't think about what they need, but I think sometimes people put too much weight on, the children are going to really suffer.
Well, that's one of the benefits of the collaborative process, is that the children actually do have a voice in a separate conversation with a child specialist who can, basically give a voice to the kids, because we do know that children tend to tell the parents what they think they want to hear.
And for those that are out there that don't know what the collaborative process is, that's when you have, similar to what's going on with our podcast, you have an attorney, two attorneys that sign an agreement that says they're never going to go to court. So there's always an incentive to stay in the process. And then you bring in a financial specialist like Mark here, or you might bring in a coach, a mental health professional like Pete. And you would bring in coaches for each of the parties, and you bring in a child specialist, and having a voice for those kids. We've seen that can be really huge.
So, talking about the new year, I believe there may be a few people on this call that are thinking my New Year's resolution is to finally go forward with the divorce. So what should we be thinking about if that's on our agenda? Number one, call now to your professionals. Get a process started now, in my opinion, because if you wait until the new year, you're going to be in with the crush of all the other people that are thinking the same way that you do. We call it divorce season in the industry for a reason. January, February is kind of a divorce season where we get a real rush of cases. And that's because people wait until the new year to file. It just seems to be like a lot of people that want to file right then.
Shawn, and I think this is something that we've also touched on before, but I think it would be good for you to, I'm going to ask you to explain what you regard as the ideal, if you will, way for a person who is decided to file for divorce to connect with a family law attorney. You as a mediator, how do you like to see those initial inquiries made? What do you think is
well, as a mediator, I like it when both parties call together,
Mhm.
or they can call my office and they can have a meet and greet, and I'll get on a Zoom with two parties.
Mhm.
It's important if you're able to do this, and I understand that there's some marriages where this isn't possible. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be insensitive to that. But for a lot of people, if you can, Mark, you and I have always said the decision of how you divorce is almost as important as the decision to divorce.
Yes.
And so kind of talking that over with your spouse, what are the options to get divorced? And you might even consider going to a website, cpcal.org. I think you actually go to cpcal.com too, and find a divorce options workshop. And they're all online now because with COVID, they've just kind of been doing them all online. You can do it by Zoom. There's some that are in person, but you can meet with an attorney, a financial specialist, and a mental health professional and learn about all of the options for divorce. Mm-hmm. From the traditional litigation model to mediation, where you have a neutral working with both parties, to collaborative practice like we described before, and other methodologies so that you can take control and be in charge of your own divorce. So that's the first thing. I love it when they have information.
Yeah,
so going to a workshop like that is huge.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because what tends to happen is people don't know what to do. And so they both know the marriage is not going well. They're having challenges in the relationship, and something will happen that will scare one of the parties, and they'll go, I need a strong attorney to protect me, fight for my rights. Yeah. And they go and they hire somebody who perhaps has a billboard with knuckle dusters on there they see on the freeway as they drive by. If they do that, what kind of attorney do you think their spouse is going to hire?
Someone to match that.
Not a milquetoast, not somebody who's going to just roll over. So now you're on what I term the divorce escalator. And that goes downwards, folks, not upwards. And once you get on it, it's very hard to get off. So talking about the process and how you want to do this, hopefully with your spouse, or at least gathering the information, as Shawn was suggesting, by attending a divorce options workshop, is a really important step.
So yeah, if you can come in together, that's better. And then even if you haven't gone to a divorce options workshop, if you call my office, I'll give you that information, for example.
And I do the same, by the way, too. And I have calls with both clients. I engineer those, and that's complimentary. So,
and don't go in thinking that you're going to get all of your questions answered for your case. What you want to focus on in the first call is process. How are we going to do this? Not, am I going to get to keep the house and where are the kids going to live? That will come. Mm-hmm. But the first thing to do is set the tone with a process that you choose. Take control of that process at the beginning, because when you wait and you just call the first billboard that you see attorney, they're going to put you in their process, which is how they do things. And there's a lot of litigators in town. That's all they do is litigation. And we kind of joke that if all you have is a hammer as one of your tools, then the only thing you're going to see around town are nails. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing with the litigator, all they're going to see. And I used to work for a litigation firm. It's just standard operating procedure. You file a petition, you go to court, you send a nasty gram to the other side, and you get going. And maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want it to be more of a respectful thing. The other thing, Pete, maybe this is something you can comment on, is that conversation you have with the spouse about process. I've always told people, talk to your spouse and say, we're getting divorced. Things are hard. They're not butterflies and rainbows, but I want to honor what was good about our relationship, and I want to put our kids first. Can we do this in a respectful way and find a process that'll keep us out of court and keep this more of a mutual, respectful process? But how do you coach people to have that?
Well, I think very much along those lines, and it's certainly not unusual where I have couples coming in and their first meetings with me are because they've decided to make the decision to divorce and they want to explore, okay, what does this mean? So I talk with them about process options. And I think what you're talking about is just this vitally important, and the way we've defined this and talked about it in previous podcasts, is the idea of the couples coming together and defining a mission statement. How do they want to go through this process? What are the objectives that they have, the goals that they have? What do they want to get out of it? I like to talk to couples who have made that decision in terms of this is an opportunity to really redefine and co-create a very different kind of post-divorce co-parenting relationship if they have children. That this is an opportunity to really take a sense of stewardship about how they want to get through this process and they come together in a collaborative way. So there's a boundary question that I'm curious about for you both. If an individual, if your first contact is with an individual, does that preclude you from working as a mediator with both parties?
My response is it depends. How was I approached in the first case? And have I talked specifics of the case? If I've just talked process with one side, I'm fine with having the same conversation with the other side. If someone hired me and said, oh, I'm getting a divorce and I just need someone to look over my shoulder, make sure I don't do anything stupid from a financial standpoint, and I've looked at the case and I've told the person the things they need to be conscious about as they go through it, and then they would come back and say, well, I think we're going to use you as a mediator. It's like, that's where I would have some difficulty, because I've already sort of, caucused with one side and tried to assist them. But if I've had a conversation with one, I've done nothing but talk process, my normal modus operandi is to literally say, now I need to have the same conversation with your wife or with your husband. Could we set that up? Because we've not talked about, the specifics.
My approach is quite similar. I tell people, okay, I want this needs to be a non-substantive process-only discussion. We're going to talk about how you're going to get divorced before we talk about the specifics of your case. Because the moment I put on a hat and start dispensing legal advice, I'm forever aligned with you. I cannot undo that. I can't unring that bell. And so if you want to use me as a mediator, which you would be wise to consider, because that's really where my best skill set is the mediation, then let's limit our conversation to process only. Where it gets a little kind of difficult sometimes is a lot of times when it's only one person calling and I can't get them scheduled together, it's because there's such a communication breakdown.
Right.
Or maybe the other person just can't believe that the divorce is really happening, and any speaking to a divorce professional means that we're going to make this happen. I've had that happen. We get that all the time, where someone's in denial that there's really a divorce happening. And so then sometimes I will give some suggestions on how to talk to the other person, but then I might refer them to someone like yourself, Pete, to really get some coaching so that they can figure out how to enroll the other spouse in a process without it having to turn into a court situation. I will tell people, you kind of talk to the other person like you do your child, in a respectful way. But I remember, I have 5 kids, and when they were little, sometimes we'd have this conversation. You can put on the red shoe or the blue shoe. Give them that choice, but they're going to wear shoes. And so it's not very different from this. We can do this the nice, friendly mediation or collaborative way, but if you refuse to come to the table, I'm going to have to hire an attorney who will just move this forward in the legal process.
Yeah.
And not that it's a threat, it's just letting you know this is the reality, this is moving forward. And so that happens too. I'm also aware of those situations where you have a coercive control, perhaps from maybe a person's calling me and they're afraid to talk to the other person. And so then I'll do a little bit of an assessment and I'll ask some more deep questions without feeling like I violated neutrality, just to find out what's going on from this person's perspective. Has there been violence? Has there been stalking behaviors? Does this person feel safe? That kind of thing. So that I can basically get them with an attorney, because I'm a mediator. I'm going to try to stay a mediator unless they really want me as their attorney. And by the way, I'll represent them in a collaborative process, but I don't go to court, right? But I will get them with an attorney who could look out for their safety concerns. Like if there's a domestic violence concern, I want to make sure that gets addressed and they get to the resources that they need to be safe. But I won't give that advice. I'll just say, you need to talk to attorney X here who can really make sure. You need to talk to them about your safety concerns. And by the way, you can still mediate a case where there's things like that going on. You just have to be very careful, and it's advanced work, but it's stuff that I do. And a lot of good mediators have the training to do that. Did that answer your question, Pete? That was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and you actually, you also responded, part of your answered something I was curious about, which is, like, do you have a preference? Would you rather, if I can put it that way, work as the mediator or, be the consulting attorney? And it sounds like you would rather be the mediator.
Me personally,
yeah.
I would personally prefer to be a mediator because I just get more of a charge out of helping people resolve a difference. I find that I don't mind representing people, but what's interesting is I actually changed my fee structure. I'm $25 more per hour if you want me to represent you. Because I'm more willing to give more of myself for less money if it's mediation than if I'm representing someone, because that takes more of a toll on me. So then I'm going to charge $25 more an hour.
And I guess to reiterate, I want to make sure that I'm saying this in the way that you see it and the way you frame it, Shawn, is that when possible, the best way to start a mediation process or to explore that is where both partners meet with the mediator together. That's what you like to see happen.
100%. That is always better. And I encourage that. If they can't do it together, then I'll schedule 2 meetings. And it'll be a non-substantive meeting, similar to what Mark was talking about. A non-substantive meeting with each of where we talk about process and we get them and I give them the same information. And when it's a challenging case, particularly high conflict or there's coercive control issues, I'll set up what we call pre-mediation counseling or coaching. Different mediators call it different things, but the idea is you have caucus sessions that are paid for with each of the parties prior to the mediation actually commencing. But it's understood that you're spending an hour with each of the parties and talking to them about their perspective on the case. And then that's okay, because both people know I'm doing this from a neutral perspective and I'm giving each of them the same amount of time. That can be a useful thing to do. Like if you got a case where it's really, really I had a case years ago where the wife was just absolutely terrified of the husband. And he really was kind of a turkey. He really did exert some manipulative behaviors, and those pre-mediation meetings were really crucial to be able to help kind of set boundaries and have some clarity about what's really going on, so that I could then help the parties then reach a resolution. Because even though the husband was kind of a turkey, I needed to be neutral to him and help them both reach an agreement. And by the way, you can, like I said, you can do domestic violence cases. You might, if there's a restraining order, you might have to modify the restraining order to allow for mediation to happen. But, it might, if we do it by Zoom, there's no contact at all. They don't even have to see each other. And if they do it at my office, I've got different conference rooms and we have precautions for how we can make sure that it's safe. So, yeah, it's interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, if people are thinking about this end of the year thing and thinking that this is their kind of their decision point, I get it. I mean, I do it every year with, taking stock of how my year went and where I'm going in my next year. I come up with a word for myself every year for how I'm going to live my life and run my business. And I can totally see where somebody's like, I need to make this change. I need to do it soon. And so, my best advice would be communicate. And maybe you don't tell the kids immediately, but you probably ought to start talking to professionals about process soon.
Yeah.
So that you can plan for it. So that when you're ready to pull the trigger on this thing, sorry, that's an unfortunate metaphor, but when you're ready to get started on this thing, you're ready to go, and you've got the tools, available to you to do what you need to do. And as I always tell my clients, stay in charge.
Because one thing that does tend to happen if you go the litigation route is that your attorney will have you fill out the papers to file the divorce.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then those papers need to be served on the other spouse. And it's not done, as I know from bitter personal experience of sitting in my nice office in La Jolla and having a biker walk into reception and drop a paper in front of other. I was a financial advisor in a nice firm and saw the papers dropped by this biker on a table as I walked up to him. Said, "You've been sued, buddy," and turned around and left in front of other clients. It did not set a good tone for the divorce. It was basically like being slapped in the face. So be aware, if you do go the litigation route, have a conversation about how to serve and not embarrass your spouse at their workplace or somewhere, where they, feel that there are social pressures, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is very important. There's no such thing anymore as a secretly filed petition. And so we've had people in the past that, I'm going to file the petition, but I'm not going to serve the other person yet until I'm ready to talk to them about it. That is a mistake, because there are these unethical people that will troll the court website and are looking for filings, and then will reach out to your spouse to solicit business from them so they can provide legal services to. You may not realize this, but you've been sued, and I'm here to represent you, and bad things can happen to you. And if the first time you're hearing about the divorce is from some third party unethical salesperson, that's not good. So don't think that don't file unless you want the other person to see it. And then I would recommend that the service happen quickly, but take charge of your service. You don't have to use Guido, like Mark was describing, to show up at a person's office. We can do this in a friendly way. In fact, mediations, we just have them sign a piece of paper that says, "Okay, I got it," and then they don't have to send a process server.
I'm wondering, to those folks listening who have made the decision that they want to get divorced, if it would be, I'm thinking it would be useful if you could talk a bit about what they should expect vis-a-vis time. This is a generalization, but I imagine that it almost always takes longer than particularly the motivated client wants it to. But just what's and I guess the other complexity is if after the first of the year, that's a busier time in your practice, Shawn, because of people starting a process, how do you talk to people, again, something we've touched on before, but in this context of, you've made the decision to do it, how do you let them know what they should expect vis-a-vis time?
Well, first of all, realize that divorce professionals have never been as busy as they are right now. Post-COVID, it's been apocalyptic for marriages, I think. I'm going to be really interested in seeing what the research will show about statistics. But everyone I've talked to has said that the divorces have just been through the roof.
And more difficult.
Because people are just more, the anxiety is higher, the anger levels are higher. It's just a crazy weird, between the political climate and the COVID situation, it's just very difficult. So just know your attorney is going to be crazy busy and will not be as responsive to you as that person would like to be. Okay. And my poor clients, I'm trying, but we're all just swamped. Okay. The other thing is be realistic about how long these things take. It's not like you're going to walk into your attorney's office or into a mediator's office and the following week you're going to be divorced. It's a process. And it takes some time, on average 6 to 8 months for a mediated divorce is my experience. If it's complex, like if there's financial complexities or emotional complexities, it'll take a year or two. Sometimes longer. Mark, we have cases that have gone 5 years. So everybody's different. So just kind of be realistic about what it's going to take to unwind this.
And I would say also, don't want it to be over fast in a way, because this is the largest financial transaction of most people's lifetimes. You want to get it right. Just getting it done, I understand it. Want to get it done. I want this behind me. I want to move forward with my life. I get all that. However, you don't want to look at it 3 years down the road and go, oh, that was really stupid.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have made that financial decision. I didn't understand it. I was rushing to get it done. So yes, you want to get it done in a timely fashion, but you want to get it done right, more important than time.
I mean, how many times have you left the car dealership and realized something that you should have thought about in the car dealership? But you now have a car. Or I just had a window guy come to our house, and Carrie and I were like, oh, we should have talked about that. We should have talked about this. But we went ahead and signed, because they pressure you, like, oh, you lose money if you don't sign this second. And you want your windows done, right? But you need to be kind of realistic about, this is going to be more work than you've probably done on any project in your life. And that includes your professional work. That's for most people. That's the report I get.
Yep. And
this is like successful CEOs that have built large companies, and they will tell you this is the hardest work they've ever engaged in. So be realistic about that. It's going to take work. I always tell my clients, I'll meet you halfway. I will never work harder than my client. A good professional will tell you that. If they try to do everything for you, it's probably a bad process. And it takes time. And a lot of times there's also that issue, and we've talked about it before on this podcast, where someone's ready to go and someone's not there yet.
Yep.
And what we've learned is slower is faster. So, and the other thing is, if you go to court, as opposed to a mediated process, I absolutely promise and guarantee that it'll take 4 times as long, because the courts are even more overwhelmed than we are. And to have just a simple motion heard can take 6 months to a year. Whereas we can do things faster. So just kind of, you've never experienced this before. Most people have not been through divorce. Or maybe you've been through 1 divorce or 2. We have our repeat offenders, our serial monogamists, but most people, they've not experienced this before. And so you don't know that this pace that feels very glacial is actually at warp speed.
And people come in talking to me about, I can't tell you how many people have walked in and said, well, our case is pretty simple. We've got a house, we've got some pensions, I have some stock options, and she did get an inheritance, but we've kind of talked about it. It's all pretty straightforward.
You agreed everything already.
Yeah. That's often the most difficult cases, because there are presumptions that people have made before they had all the information necessary to make a truly informed decision. And
you mean you want your inheritance to remain separate property? I didn't realize that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
That happens, right?
Yep.
Or when they actually see what the support numbers are, whether it's the payor or the payee, they're both going to be unhappy with that number, because it's always more than the payor wants to pay and less than the payee wants to receive. And they're both right, because there's just not enough money to go around.
Yep.
And so, giving yourself a little bit of patience and a little bit of flexibility and understanding, compassion for yourself, that this is going to take some time, that you're going to need to adjust to it, is a really good approach, I think.
This has been, for me, a really interesting conversation. I'm glad we're having it. Although I need to say to the two of you, I'm disappointed that neither one of you suggested, given the timing of the year, that we should have been doing this with eggnog. So,
well, don't we have one more before Christmas we have scheduled to record? We can all come with our beverage of choice at that point. So.
And your sweaters are way too tasteful for this time of year, guys.
I always thought that song "Auld Lang Syne" was very appropriate for New Year's and divorce. Should old acquaintances be forgot? What some people aim for. Can I just forget? But
Well, so
unfortunately,
Shawn, so if somebody has made the decision to get divorced, how do they get in touch with you?
well, the best thing to do would be to go to my website first, WeberDisputeResolution.com. That's Weber with one B, like the grill, dispute, like we had a fight, resolution, like we solved it.com. And we will, if you have any kind of dispute, we will match you with a mediator who will help you resolve your dispute. And we can talk about these things. And if you're doing a divorce, if you can pull it off, let's get both of you to talk to me, and we can figure out a process that'll work for you.
And Mark, if people have financial questions about divorce or other financial questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My website, pacdivorce.com, PACDIVORCE.com, lays out exactly how we do things, how we approach things. Like Shawn, we don't go to court anymore, but we can help you resolve your issue if you want to work in a mediated environment. And we can also help on one side if you just want some information to know if you're in the process and know if what you're deciding to do makes sense financially. So we can help on all those levels. Peter.
Yeah, and I think that here's the pitch that I'd like to make today, that I'm hoping that people are listening to this who are thinking about divorce, but they're open to the possibility of doing marital therapy to see whether or not there's a way to save their marriage. Mm-hmm. Because I think of that as my primary specialty, working with couples that are really struggling, concerned that there isn't a way forward for them. Those are the couples that I really enjoy working with. And so if you're interested in that kind of a service, my website is peterroussos.com, PETERROUSSOS.com. I'm also available to help families that are going through divorce processes in the way of coaching in support of the kinds of processes that Shawn and Mark offer.
And we love working with you, Pete. You always make the case more smooth.
Well, I so love and enjoy working with the two of you and have such respect for, I can't tell you how many times I find myself listening to the two of you and just being really impressed and appreciative of how sharp you are, how compassionate you are, and how much I think you just really understand and know how to work with relational dynamics. So it certainly makes working with you guys very smooth, and quite honestly, you're also really delightful, and it makes the process fun. So,
well, Pete, if ever I suffer from depression, I'm just going to hang out with you. And have you say things like that.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
It's a mutual feeling, Pete.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Thank you, guys. It really is a pleasure doing this with you.
All right. And to those out there in podcast land that are listening to us, please like us, say nice things about us online. If you know somebody that needs to hear what we have to say, please share our podcast with them. We're available anywhere where you can download a podcast. I think we're pretty much universal now. So love that we have listeners out there. And those of you that are regular listeners, we really love you. And those of you that would share with others what we do, I think we have an important message to share. So now at the end of the year, we wish you a very happy holidays and a very prosperous new year.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.